Today marks 1 year exactly since my beautiful grandmother became reunited once again with my amazing grandpa. So in today's video, not only do I want to dedicate it to my beautiful grandma, Lolly England, not only is it going to help me to process the feelings that I'm feeling today, but I did also think it would be a really valuable video to discuss the beauty of death. Often in a lot of modern cultures, death is seen as a thing that people don't talk about, or a thing that people are very, very scared of. But on a spiritual level, it's important to, while also feeling grief and pain and loss, and all of those feelings are valid, it's also quite comforting and healing to see the beauty in what happens for that spirit, as painful as it might be for us left on earth who miss the presence, or the physical presence, of that person. I want to talk a little bit about what I've learned from friends and relatives of mine who are also perhaps even more spiritually connected than me, and what they've taught me about where grandma is now, how grandma feels now, how she can be with me now, to help anybody else who's lost someone that they love and who's looking for more confirmation or validation of how they're feeling at the moment. So, in honor of my grandma, I'll tell you a little bit about just how amazing she is. She truly is, was, always will be a very beautiful, inside and out human being and physical and spiritual being. She was born in in Shanghai, in China. I'm feeling this huge pull to all of my ancestors at the moment. All of these strong people who I feel so much gratitude for. Everything that they went through and that they built and created and passed down is so that I get to be here speaking to you right now. And I'm so grateful for all of them. That's why I didn't bother putting any makeup on today. So, Grandma was born in Shanghai in China, but not of Chinese nationality. She's her ancestors came from Macau, or were living in Macau for a few generations before, which is a Portuguese part of China. So then when we go back even further in our family tree, our family did originate, we think, from Portugal itself. a mixture of people who came over from Portugal with a mixture of people who are from China to create, the Macanese race of people who are from Macau specifically. So there's a beautiful and unique culture within the Macanese community. In fact, I've been connected on Ancestry.com to about 60,000 relatives of mine who all were from or are from Macau. So going back to Grandma, she was born into a Macanese family in Shanghai, China. And she told me so many beautiful, incredible stories of her childhood. She looked back fondly to her memories of Shanghai in the late 1920s and throughout the 1930s when she grew up. How she was so proud to be a girl with a lot of gumption, a girl who, while having many sisters, was quite different and on her own path and much preferred playing with all the boys than playing with the girls. And the Second World War came along when she was a teenager, which caused her to prematurely terminate her education. So she only went to school up until the age of about 14, I believe. But you wouldn't guess it. She was one of the most intelligent people I know. And endured a lot during that wartime. And at the same time, my grandpa, they hadn't yet met, at least Grandpa thinks he remembers seeing her when they were children, but they hadn't really officially met or started dating or anything at this point. Grandpa, who also was living in Shanghai to a British family, because British people became prisoners of war under the Japanese occupation of China at that time during the Second World War. Grandpa actually was in a prisoner of war camp for, I think, 3 years, up until the age of about 21 or 22, which I think is such a, I can't even imagine what that must be like, what that must have been like. He was tortured, admittedly for escaping 17 times to such a rebel. He would hop over the fence of the prisoner of war camp to get the other people in the camp supplies like salt, pepper, needle, thread, cigarettes, whatever it was that they wanted or needed. He got away with it many times, but ultimately reached that time when he got caught and was very, very badly beaten and tortured. But anyway, it really does, it blows my mind when I think that there are so many things that could have happened that didn't happen. And because things transpired just in the precise and intricate way that they did, it led to Grandma and Grandpa meeting. It led to them both being alive and well after the war. It led to them having 4 children, the first being my mum. And then, you know, the whole timeline from then till when I was born was, again, just like that. I'm sure many of you can relate when you think, wow, if my mum hadn't decided to go here, or my dad didn't decide to move to this town, I wouldn't exist, you know. And there's a lot of those butterfly effect points throughout my family's timeline where they moved from one part of the world to another part of the world to another part of the world, and it just gets me thinking, wow, I am an absolute miracle that I even exist, as are you. Our life is a total miracle, a total 1 in a trillion chance of actually happening. So, Grandma and Grandpa, they moved to Hong Kong, and then eventually they retired in the UK. They followed my mum's footsteps. Mum moved to the UK when she was 18. And Grandma and Grandpa decided to move to London to retire. So I was born and raised in London. And every single Sunday we would go to Grandma and Grandpa's. The whole family, all of my cousins, all of my aunties and uncles. It was always Sundays at Grandma and Grandpa's. And coming up to 18 or 19 years ago now, when I was 7, so 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Grandpa got a really severe stroke and was hospitalized, and it was such an extreme stroke with such extreme paralysis that the doctors said he would never be able to ever fully recover from the stroke. It was more of a question of, how long he could live in that way. And bearing in mind, I'm skipping past huge swathes of family history here, but to tell you a little bit more about Grandpa. Grandpa was always so active and athletic. He was always the best at every single sport. He would always win every race, and all the way towards the end of his life, he was always so keen on being able to be active and being able to speak and be the life of the party. And so when he had his stroke and he could no longer speak and he could no longer walk and he could no longer swallow, he was trying his hardest to unplug himself from all of the life support, because he didn't see that as a proper life for him. But we, as loving humans that want to hold on and want to for ourselves more than anything, he was in a nursing home for I think almost 2 years, living this half-life really. So anyway, this all happened about 20 years ago, and Grandma would go and visit him in the home every single day. They were such a beautiful couple. They're beautifully suited to each other, beautifully in love. And that's them on their wedding day. That's a whole other story. I'm kind of jumping through different timelines here, but this wedding day was an emotional day. It must have been very emotional. Grandma was 21 and Grandpa was a few years older. And on the day of their wedding day, because it was still... this was in 1949, so the Second World War had finished, yay, but then there was the communist revolution and takeover in China, and so people from Portuguese families and British families, they fled. They were the only ones who could leave, so they all were packing up their lives to leave what was going on in China at the time with, mass shootings and a lot of people living in total fear during this particular pocket of history. So on the day of Grandma and Grandpa's wedding day, Grandma's sisters and mother, after the wedding ceremony, had to get on a ship to go to Portugal. Can you imagine that, by the way, that on that what should be the happiest day of your life, it's so bittersweet, because on the same day, you know that you're not going to see your mother and your sisters for who knows how long, could be years, without FaceTime, only being able to write letters to each other. So again, I just have so much love and respect for everything that they experience. And, when they talked about it, they said it with so much strength, so matter-of-factly. It was just the way it was, and they handled it and grew through it all. So, beautiful couple. And like I said, all the way through till the very end of Grandpa's life, Grandma would always go and visit him in the home and was very, very loving. And then sadly, it was almost a relief for Grandpa. Eventually, he was able to transcend. He passed away and, was free of that body that was no longer serving him. And Grandma was still alive in her physical form for another 17 years. And to think especially that they were so inseparable and so meant to be together. You know, we had many great times, Grandma and all of us, the rest of the family. You know, Grandma lived a really, really great life till pretty much the very end. But, you know, there was always a grandpa-shaped hole missing from the last 17 years of her life. So she's a very independent woman. She got on with everything and adapted. But it was quite interesting and beautiful to see that as she was reaching the final years and final months of her life, you know, she was ready. She was ready to go. She passed away when she was 92. I remember on her 90th birthday, we all gathered around her house. We threw her a big party. We celebrated. We got her a beautiful, beautiful cake, and we sang, and she blew out the candles. And then she said, okay, I've hit 90 now. I'm ready to go. And we were like, no, Grandma, don't be silly. Don't say that. Come on, don't be like that, you know. And looking back, when we said that, we were probably we were saying that more for ourselves than for her. You know, from our younger perspectives, we thought, never give up, you know, don't, give up the will to live. But looking at it now, you know, she had lived the most phenomenal life with so many adventures, so many children, so many grandchildren, so much travel, to have gone from being an incredibly, incredibly poor family of, did she have 6 or 8 siblings? You know, some of them passed away during childhood, so I didn't know them all. But, you know, to have come from such humble beginnings, to have actually built and created a beautiful life through, you know, doing everything that they could, doing the best that they could with what they knew how, you know, to then living a beautiful life of retirement in London. She'd completed it. You know what I mean? She completed it. She was no longer able to have the same quality of life as she did in her sort of heyday. And she was ready to be reunited with Grandpa. And who were we to tell her any different of how she could choose to do with her life? So, as she, in the last few months of her life, as much as I was so sad to see her health deteriorating, I also felt this more almost like a sense of that relief was coming for her, that we were heading towards the conclusion. And as much as that might have been upsetting for me to be losing my grandma, I had to also remind myself of a bigger picture, that this is her life, not mine. It could be cruel and selfish for me to want her to sort of hang on to a life of, you know, not being able to do the things that she loves. Like she used to love to go shopping and to go for her walks and to go for Chinese meals. And towards the final months of her life, she wasn't able to do any of that. So what kind of life would that have been for her if she had continued in that way for a year or two after that? So when she was in the hospital and for the final time, and the doctors confirmed that, you know, she'd had an infection, and they tried even the strongest antibiotics, and it wasn't enough for her body to fight the infection. As much as that sounded very sad, I thought, okay, I'm grateful that we know what's coming. And it meant that almost every single member of the family was able to come to the hospital, to visit her, to hold her hand, to let her know how loved she truly is. And I almost felt like it's probably the way that people honored and respected the beautiful, natural, you know, the beautiful, natural, inevitable rite of passage of death, especially when death comes towards the end of a life. Obviously, if somebody dies early, dies young, it can be much harder to process when you feel like somebody's life has been taken prematurely. But I'm speaking specifically about my grandma, where it was a real, you know, the book was complete, and where we were all able to honor that and watch the sun set. So this time last year, my mum and I in particular, we slept in the hospital with grandma. I'm so grateful that this all happened before the pandemic. I'm so grateful that, you know, nobody even knew what coronavirus was just a year ago in October 2019. And so we were able to just sleep by her side for 2 weeks while her body just slowly shut down, and to play her all her favorite music, to, on a little sponge, be able to give her her favorite drink, Johnny Walker Black Label, to see her face light up with pleasure with a little bit of a sip of Johnny Walker. Because she couldn't eat at this point. So, you know, a little bit of Johnny Walker went a long way. And as sad and as sad as it was, I look back now, and it was actually a really, really beautiful final chapter of her life. To be surrounded by love, to be comfortable. She had her own private room in a hospital, which was paid for by the NHS. So grateful for the NHS, our free healthcare service in the UK. So, so grateful. People complain about it sometimes, but I'm so grateful for it. They treated her like an absolute queen. The queen that she is, the queen that she was. They were kind and understanding to us, knowing what we would need during this time as well. And then the one night that Mum said to me, Lucie, go have a proper night's sleep in your bed. I said, are you sure? She said, yes. And so that night, which I think is so beautiful, that night it was just Grandma and Mum. Mum, her firstborn child. And I have a feeling that, you know, it was that Grandma has this sort of protectiveness over me. She didn't want me to be there. And I totally respect and appreciate that. So she held on for 10 days after they said, you know, we can't help. And they unplugged everything. 10 days. She kept going, she kept breathing, she kept sleeping, she kept drinking a little bit of whiskey. Then I went home, and Mum and she had some special magical time, just the two of them. And Mum said she remembered that Grandma, her mum, told her a story of when she was born. So when Grandma had her first daughter, her first child, she was very young, 23, I think, very scared. Nobody in those days told you what to expect. Nobody talked about what childbirth, what happened. Husbands weren't allowed to be there. So for 12 hours all throughout the night, Grandma was in labor with her firstborn child, alone in a room. No doctors, no midwives were coming in to check on her. They just left her to it for the night until she was ready to go into full labor. And then Grandma obviously did give birth to Mum. And when she then gave birth, for the first few hours of Mum's life, it was just Grandma and Mum. Together, silently, in the same room. So I think what a beautiful, conclusive mirror reflection. When then we fast forward to the end of Grandma's life, and once again, it was just Grandma and Mum, silently together in the same room for a few hours, for 12 hours or so. And then, when the moment was right, Grandma stopped breathing and her spirit was free. And she was able to be reunited with Grandpa. And when I went in the next morning and I saw her body, I could tell it really was clear that she was no longer there. It was a body, it was no longer her, and her spirit had gone, or was at least in the process of going. We opened a window just to make sure she could leave. And yeah. So then a couple of weeks later at her funeral, we met a lady who we hadn't seen in years, a family friend who I'd never known was actually super clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, and from a very young age had always been able to full-on see spirits, ghosts, angels. And she said that during the funeral ceremony that she felt a presence next to her with and one side of her face went very, I can't remember what she said, whether it was hot or cold, but she felt one side of her face doing this thing. And so she asked me at the wake, at the celebration of life after the funeral, she said to me, "Did your grandma have a stroke or anything like that?" I said, "No, Grandpa did. Why?" And she said, "Oh, because whenever I feel the presence of a spirit who had something like half paralysis or like a stroke in their life, I get this sensation down half of my face." And so she said, so I think I felt that Grandpa was there in spirit at Grandma's funeral, is what she said. Which was just so beautiful to hear that, we as all of her descendants were stood or were sat during the ceremony with the coffin at the front. And to know that other ancestors would have also been there at that moment, that very significant moment of the transition from life to death. And that Grandpa was there at the funeral, stood right next to all of us in our physical bodies, waiting to take Grandma's hand and take her over to the other side. So I loved having more of an in-depth conversation with this family friend. I was asking her so many questions about what else did she see, what else did she pick up on. And while we were having the chat, she said, "Yeah, Grandma's right here, right now. She's she couldn't resist. She's here to join in," because this is where we were having the family party. So, everyone's chatting, everyone's catching up, everyone's, the children are running around between people's legs. And she said, "Yeah, Grandma's here. Grandpa's here too." And it made perfect sense because they never would have wanted to miss out on a family party. They would never want to be left out of that. They loved, their favorite thing would be being surrounded by all of the family and being right there as the stars of the party. That was their role. So that was so, so beautiful to hear. And again, this family friend said to me, yes, obviously they don't have a physical form anymore, but they adopt a physical form for me to see them. And they can choose to look however they want to look. And she said, it's interesting, I can see Grandma here, I can see your grandma. And she looks, and we had loads of photos I created this huge photo wall at the after party, at the celebration of her life, Grandma looking phenomenal during all ages. She was so stylish. Back in the 60s, she had the most amazing look. And so this family friend was saying, yes, she's chosen to take on the form of when she was in her 30s with her perfect hair and her outfits. I think, how cool is that? Grandma now gets to, she's free from the from the restraints, from the restrictions of aging and getting wrinklier and of what the physical body is limited to. And instead she can just choose to be fabulous in her, tailor-made Chinese dress in Hong Kong, which is where they moved to. And when she was about 30, they were living in Hong Kong. She can look like that forever. So, I thought that was so, so beautiful. And it was the most healing thing for me to hear while we were there at the celebration of life together, because I really, at that point, I didn't know whether, that was it now, like she's gone forever, and this woman said, no, on the contrary, she can be with you more now than ever before. She's having a great time with Grandpa, and she said, yes, she's confirming that to me now. She's with Grandpa, and yes, I can confirm that Grandpa was there to help her over to the other side, because that can sometimes be quite a long or uncomfortable journey, and he was there to take her hand, as it were, and guide her across. So he's been waiting for her, and they're reunited, and at the same time I can call their names and they can be with me at any moment. I mean, isn't that just the best thing to know, and the best thing to, be able to conclude her life with happy thoughts rather than with sad thoughts? It's like the best of both worlds, literally the best of both worlds. So 1 year on today, I've been feeling all sorts of emotions. I've had tears of love, and I'm feeling a real pull just to focus on all of this and to spend some time processing and connecting to my ancestors and to my living family as well. I'm going to go over and see my parents now and spend some good loving time with them. And so I thank you. I thank you for being part of my life. I thank you all for providing me with this platform to not only teach and empower, but also to help me to process the different chapters of my life to an audience who I know understands and who cares and who is open to listening. So thank you so, so much from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to listen to this, and I hope that it gave you some clarity and support, and maybe even some relief if you're in a process of grieving some people that you love. You can connect to them. They're watching over you. They love you. They love you more than they've ever loved you, because now they're not limited by the limiting beliefs of being a human. They're just an infinite, pure being of love and light now. So if anything, the relationship with them now can be even better. So, thank you all. I love you all. And don't forget to subscribe and like and all of that stuff. But most importantly, sending you a big hug. Speak to you all soon. Till next time.